Right now, you might be sitting there with a drink in your hand. Beer, wine, whatever it is. And chances are you just drink it and move on with your night. But what you're holding is one of the oldest habits a human being has ever had. Older than writing, older than farming. It actually predates our species entirely. Because this story doesn't start with the first brewery or the first vineyard. It starts about 10 million years ago on a forest floor in Africa, when a small primate picked up a piece of fruit that had been sitting on the ground for way too long. That fruit had already started to rot. Its sugars were breaking down, yeast was creeping in, and fermentation was underway. Which means the fruit had a small amount of alcohol in it. And when that primate ate it, it felt a little different, a little looser, a little good. In 2014, a biologist at UC Berkeley named Robert Dudley published a book laying out exactly this idea. His argument was that over millions of years, our ancestors didn't just tolerate alcohol by accident, they evolved to actively seek it out because it often meant they'd found ripe, calorie-rich food. So by the time actual humans showed up, the craving was already built in. Nobody had to invent the taste for it. It was already there. The real question is, when did we start making it on purpose? In 2018, archaeologists were digging near Haifa, Israel, at a site called Rakafet Cave. It had been used by a group called the Natufians roughly 13,000 years ago. Inside, they found stone mortars carved right into the bedrock, and when they tested what was left inside them, they found residue from wheat and barley that had been soaked, sprouted, and left to ferment. In plain terms, that's beer. Brewed in a cave 13,000 years ago. Here's the part that matters. The Natufians weren't farmers yet. They hadn't invented agriculture. They were still gathering wild grain by hand. They didn't grow that barley, they just found it growing wild. And yet brewing was already important enough that they figured it out before they figured out farming. For a long time, the assumed order was simple. Humans settle down, start farming, build villages, and eventually stumble onto fermentation. Rakafet flips that timeline. These people were brewing while they were still nomads. About 1,000 years later, something even stranger shows up in southeastern Turkey. At a site called Göbekli Tepe, people raised massive stone pillars, some over 10 tons, arranged in careful circles and carved with animal figures. And they did this before pottery, before permanent homes, before farming. For years, nobody could explain why hunter-gatherers would organize that much labor just to move and carve 10-ton stones. Then archaeologists found huge stone vats at the site, and inside them, chemical traces of fermented grain. People weren't just drinking here, they were brewing in bulk, likely for large gatherings. The leading theory now is that this wasn't a settlement at all. It was a destination. People traveled from all over the region to meet, feast, and drink together. Which brings up a question archaeologists have argued about for decades. Why did humans start farming in the first place? An archaeochemist named Patrick McGovern, widely considered the top expert on ancient alcohol, has spent his career arguing that people didn't start farming to make bread. They started farming to make beer. His reasoning is pretty simple. Bread takes real effort. You have to grind grain, knead dough, and bake it. Beer is far easier. You soak grain in water, walk away, and fermentation does the rest on its own. If the desire to drink was stronger than the desire to eat grain in a different form, that alone could explain why people first started cultivating crops. Which would mean alcohol didn't show up after civilization began. It might be one of the reasons civilization began at all. By 7000 BCE, the evidence gets a lot more specific. At a Neolithic village called Jiahu in central China, archaeologists uncovered pottery jars with residue from a fermented drink made of rice, honey, grapes, and hawthorn berries. Chemical analysis confirmed exactly what was in it. This is the oldest confirmed alcohol recipe ever found anywhere in the world, and it wasn't some crude accident. It was a deliberate blend of several ingredients, which means whoever made it already knew what they were doing. By the time you get to ancient Egypt, beer had become something much bigger than a drink. The workers who built the pyramids were paid in it, roughly 4 to 5 liters a day, as an actual wage instead of coins or grain. Part of the reason was practical. Water from the Nile was often unsafe, but the brewing process made beer far cleaner to drink. It also carried real calories and nutrients. which mattered a lot to laborers hauling limestone blocks through desert heat. So for these workers, beer wasn't just a reward, it was closer to a meal. And then there was the spiritual side. Egyptians believed beer had been given to humanity by the god Osiris. It showed up in temple offerings, burial rituals, and even medical treatments, where doctors mixed herbs into it and prescribed it for everything from stomach issues to infections. One drink was doing the job of a paycheck, a water filter, a meal, a medicine, and a prayer all at once. So here's the full timeline. 10 million years ago, fermented fruit helped your ancestors track down valuable food. 13,000 years ago, people were deliberately brewing beer in caves before they'd even invented farming. Around 12,000 years ago, they may have built some of the first monuments in human history just to have a place to drink together. 9,000 years ago, they had actual recipes. 5,000 years ago, entire civilizations were running on it. Alcohol didn't arrive after we built the world around us. There's a real chance it's one of the reasons we built that world in the first place. So the next time you take a sip of something, you're carrying forward a habit that started before your species even had a name for itself. The ingredients changed, the process got more refined, and the containers definitely got fancier. But the impulse underneath all of it is exactly the same one that made a small primate reach for a piece of rotting fruit on a forest floor 10 million years ago. We just eventually learned how to do it on purpose.